Serious, what's your real ghost story? My grandmother coming to me in a dream to tell me she died. I was in China at the time. When I called home, my family and girlfriend lied about it. The next night I had the same dream and called home to check in, but they lied again. I finally got my girlfriend to admit it. The dream stopped. When I got home, I was told that the last thing my grandmother said was to ask for me by name. Posted this elsewhere recently, but my biological dad lives in a creepy old farmhouse he renovated. I was helping him build out the office late one night. He went to the bathroom, and I kept plunking away. I was on the floor and set my hammer down. I felt something, a presence, and looked to where I thought someone would be. Nothing. I reach back down for my hammer and it's out of arm's reach, maybe 5 feet further than where I had set it down. I hadn't moved, at all. He comes back after he's finished and I tell him what had just happened. He laughed and said, "The little girl must be playing with you." Little girl, what? He then tells me that every now and then he hears a little girl laughing, and has even seen her. She's always wearing the same pair of overalls and she just kind of wanders around upstairs. I'm not one to believe in paranormal experiences, but I have no explanation other than a little girl ghost just wanted to play. My mom died when I was a pretty young adult. I couldn't get her to answer her phone, so I went to her house to check on her and found her body. My mom's sister and I have always been very close. When she came in town for the funeral, we decided to spend the night at my mother's for a few nights to feel closer to her and be amongst her things. We were sitting in the living room with her cat. When I found her, her cat was curled around her head. She loved that cat. We were talking about her life and it got a little bit deep. We were both crying and hoping she was at peace. Suddenly the cat who was sitting between us jumped up and started hissing at the fireplace. Then the flue to the fireplace slammed shut really loud and scared the shit out of us. We then heard footsteps above us in her bedroom where she died. It was scary and not comforting for us or the cat. My mom committed suicide and had been really despondent after my dad died. She was also the kind of person who never wanted anyone to feel sorry for her. I think we got too personal about her life and pissed her off. I had several other uncomfortable moments in her house while cleaning it out. My then 8-year-old son and I were packing boxes and her bedroom door slammed shut. It was a nice day, no windows or doors open. My son looked at me and asked why is Granny so sad? When I was around 5, my aunt got diagnosed with cancer, so my mom left me at my dad's for over a month to be able to care for her 24/7. One night, I woke up crying and asking if my mom came with my aunt. When my family questioned me, I said my aunt came to say goodbye and that she loves me and will take care of me, but did my mom come with her? I miss my aunt. 5 minutes later the phone rang and it was my mom telling us my aunt had just passed. My grandma and great-grandma, and their dog, moved into an old cabin. There were many stories she had about strange things that happened in the house. Sinks turning on in the middle of the night, noises of footsteps in the attic, motion sensing night lights turning on when my great-grandma was asleep with the dog in another room, etc. Also, there were crosses carved above many of the doorways. When they moved in, my aunt helped with some painting and covered the crosses in the process. As they covered them, they heard noises coming from another part of the house. The next day, the crosses were all back. Coincidentally, my mom's boss's son just recently moved into the same house, 15 years later, and she was telling my mom about her son's haunted house before ever being told that my grandma and great-grandma lived there. Another one. When my dad became somewhat of a believer, was in his 50s, my grandmother was in hospice and we received the news she had passed away. My dad and I were on the back porch hanging out talking about everything. He seemed off though. Yes, I know his mother passed, but this was different. He seemed off. I asked him about it and he said he had the strangest dream the night my grandmother died. He was in the room with her in Michigan. We live in VA. My grandmother stood up, hugged and kissed him and told him everything would be okay. She proceeded to somehow walk out of some new door in the room that led to a green pasture with other relatives that had passed. He could only recognize his grandparents, the others he didn't know who they were, but something in his gut said they were other relatives my grandmother knew. It's crazy because now when we talk about it he doesn't act like it's a big deal. He was just having a crazy dream that was influenced by the situation. But he dreamed it the night she passed away. It was like the other relatives and her were telling him it'll be okay, I'm better off now. Was visiting a friend in Chicago. She told me under no uncertain terms, the ghost of a woman who lived there wasn't really fond of men staying there. I was told that I needed to make sure I closed any door behind me, lest she slam the door behind me. Sure as shit. First night I'm there. I get up to go pee in the middle of the night. I didn't close the bedroom door when I came back from the bathroom. Door slammed so hard it knocked a piece of art off the damn wall. We started hearing knocks on the siding, second floor, as if someone was at the door. This followed loud banging in the basement every night. I decided to record through the night and this snowflake ornament started spinning long after all had gone to bed. There was no draft as the other ornaments didn't move. When I played it back I heard a man's voice repeatedly calling me a hoe. I still live there. My great-grandma died in '92. My auntie got the phone call that night. The next morning, my then 3-year-old cousin came out of her room and sleepily mentioned, "Mama, Grandma Rose, the one who just died, visited me last night. She said to tell you that her hip doesn't hurt anymore." One night I awoke to something settling over my face. Initially, I thought it was my bed covers, but then I realized it all felt wrong and reached up and grabbed the cloth and threw it. I reached over to turn on my bedside light and froze because of what I saw. All of my clothes, which previously had been folded neatly in a basket, were now stacked atop of me, neck to toe. The piece of cloth that was settling over my face was a pair of my son's shorts. So, of course I froze and listened for whoever was in my home. I stayed that way for about 10 minutes and heard nothing, so I got up and started to search my house. The only other person that lived with me was my 8-year-old son, and I found him fast asleep in his top bunk. I know he didn't stack those clothes because the bunk he was in was metal and very squeaky and he would have definitely made noise getting in or out. He is a pretty serious kid and I've never known him to play tricks. In any case, I felt that last piece go over my face, so he wasn't there for that. I searched the entire house and no one was there but us. I believe it was poltergeist activity. Apparently, stacking is typically what poltergeists do. I also found a random puddle of water once in the middle of the living room when no one had been home. There was no place that could have come from either. Strange stuff. My Uncle Bill died when I was 4. He and I were incredibly close. He was my favorite and I was his. I lived in Colorado but we went down to Alabama for his funeral. I'm 31 now, so I don't remember him actually visiting me, but I do remember telling my mom, "Mom, Uncle Bill says it's going to snow." My mom calmly reminded me that Uncle Bill was gone, and we were in Alabama in 1995. "It doesn't snow here." Uncle Bill and I got the last laugh when we all woke up the next day and it was snowing in Alabama. Very lightly, but it was there. When I was 10 I was in bed with my back to the door and suddenly felt something standing in my bedroom staring at my back. I'd never felt scared in that room before, but in that moment there was no doubt something was in there with me. I was frozen in sheer terror and couldn't move. Dead silence. Just me and whatever it was. After a few minutes, I screamed bloody murder for my dad, who came running into the room. As soon as he opened the door, he asked me, "What was that?" Every once in a while one of us will bring it up. Never happened again after that. This one is a little banal but it's just as real. A couple years ago, I moved into a 4-bedroom home. One of the bedrooms always had a vibe to it. Nothing bad, but definitely a sad place. The rest of the house is fine, but me and one of my kids stayed out of that room whenever possible. When she was about 8, out of the blue she asked me who died in that room. I told her it felt like a dog. She said, "I was thinking that somebody loved him." When I was younger my dad inherited his father's car. One day, a year or so later, we were in car, so my father get me and my sister to school. Near to a crossroad we had the feeling that he was with us in the car for a short time. The cold, his cologne. Right after this feeling my father stopped the car as fast as he could. A drunk truck was crossing and almost took our lives. My uncle died and due to COVID we couldn't go to where he was. So my relatives who lived close decided to set their own wake in our house. I was cleaning my room when all of a sudden I hear this male voice clearly saying hello in my right ear. I dropped everything and went outside, but my male relatives were all out. In our culture, when a person dies we believe they revisit the place where they have relatives. My girlfriend and I were driving back to her parents' house when I was probably 17 or 18. We went down this one road and she screamed for me to swerve. I figured she seen a deer. When I turned my head I seen a woman dressed in white pushing a white bassinet. She was also holding a boy's hand and he was wearing white. They weren't in my rear view. I was just walking up the stairs and I hear a little girl laughing in my parents' bedroom. I shrieked and almost fell backwards down the stairs, and I know it was a ghost because no kids were playing outside and my siblings were in the basement. My best one happened when my, at the time, best friend and I volunteered to help clean up a cemetery after a big storm my senior year. We were walking along, talking, picking up branches and shit from the storm, tidying up stuff left on graves, just making an afternoon of it. And suddenly, at the exact same time, we both froze, and turned to look at the same spot behind us. After asking what each other heard, we confirmed that we both heard a woman's voice go, "Shh," right behind us. It wasn't like the wind in the trees. It was like when the bitchy librarian catches you talking louder than 5 decibels. And we both looked at the exact same spot where it came from. There was no one there. The closest person to us was a good 50 feet away. They'd have had to yell just for us to hear them. Curious, my friend took a look at the headstone right there, then looked at the one next to it, Y'all, it was a mother buried next to her infant. We were disturbing the baby. I used to wake up early in my house, and every time I do I see shadows walking through the hallway. It got to the point where the shadows ended up having faces so terrifying that I started oversleeping just so I don't have to see them. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more daily videos.